Hello and welcome to the 19th episode of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
Today we're discussing medieval opinions on God, and this is actually the last chapter in the medieval section.
I was excited about that.
Really?
Well, just we're making progress.
Yes, that's true. So soon we'll be moving on to early modern philosophy, I believe is the next section.
Modern.
Early modern. Then it goes to modern. There's 4 sections in this book. It's early modern, then modern.
Then late modern? Ultra modern?
I don't think we've gotten to ultra modern yet.
Modern English?
That's what we speak.
Very good.
All right.
That's also an 80s band.
Really?
Melt With You?
I don't know that.
Modern English? You don't know Melt With You?
No, I don't think I do.
It's a one-hit wonder super band.
Is it?
Yeah, you want me to sing a little?
No, not at all. All right, so we're going to start off with the God of Augustine.
Yeah, I never realized they were named after English. Like in English, not just that they were modern English. You know, like...
Oh, yeah, that's...
They're from England.
Because there's divisions of English. Because there's Old English, then Middle English, then Early Modern English.
I wonder if one of them was a linguist.
Perhaps. Maybe that's where I'll go. I'll become a linguist and I'll become a one-hit wonder in a band. That's it.
You dare to dream.
All right, so we start off with the God of Augustine. And he sets up...
Wait, he's everybody's God, not just God of Augustine.
Augustine's understanding of God.
Very good, yes.
So he sets up this hierarchy of things, and so there's the lifeless things that merely exist, such as stones and dirt and that sort of thing. Then there are living things with sensation but not intelligence, so animals and that sort of thing. And then there are living things with intelligence, i.e., rational human beings. And so with these,
doesn't he have a little bit of overlap? I thought he had a little bit of overlap between the living things and the rational things, didn't he? Allow for animals to have some.
Yes, he said that they can
feel pain,
and pleasure, and
right.
that sort of thing. Yes. But they don't have that superior intellect that humans do. And so with these 3 hierarchies, he kind of tries to prove that God exists.
He's kind of a chauvinist to other animals, but please proceed.
Yes. He says that if A makes judgments about B, A is superior. And so God is that which nothing is superior. So he's kind of saying, like, for us to be able to look at animals and we can make judgments about them, we can perceive them in a higher way than they perceive us, so too there must be something that perceives us in a way beyond our own comprehension. There's something out there that cannot be perceived by a higher being, and that ultimate high must be God.
I think that might make me a demigod because I have a superpower of evaluating other people and judging them and making judgments about them.
Yes, but you yourself are not beyond judgment, so I don't know.
Oh, dang it!
Yeah, that's the issue.
That's a real bummer. What do you think of that theory?
I kind of agree. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I guess in general terms.
Yes. And so
I don't think it necessarily follows, though.
Really?
Do you?
Maybe. I like it.
I mean, why does it mean that there has to be something above us just because we judge something else?
Well, I don't know if he's saying that there must be something, but that is just how he would define God.
Oh, okay.
So if God exists, then he has to be beyond all
judgment.
All
of
judgment.
him.
Yes, and so that's where he moves into the proof because he points to ethical truths, such as the desire to be happy and wise. So those are the things that are common among all humanity, and they're not really explainable. They're not really like. There's really nothing to break down about them. It is just a fact that we all desire to be happy. We all desire to be wise. And with that, he also kind of points to math. He says that, 7 and 3 are 10. And there's nothing that will ever change that. So that is eternal. And so with this...
I like his theory of ethical truths that are constant and you can't argue with them. I like that idea. And
so with this, he's kind of going back to that breakdown of the hierarchy of things. We cannot pass judgment on if... 7 and 3 are 10, or should 7 and 3 be 10? So they must be truths. They must be higher than the human intellect because we cannot pass judgment on them. And so that by that same reasoning, if those sorts of truths are higher than humans, the truth must be God because we cannot pass judgment on those truths, and so too those truths must be God.
Interesting theory.
Yes, I really like it. I really like it, yeah. I think God has to be truth. God has to always be true, otherwise he is not God.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know that it flows that far.
Really?
Well, I keep coming back to my evil God theory.
Yes. That's discussed a little bit later, I think.
Yeah, a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, we can talk
I think most philosophers just don't want to contemplate an evil God.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And so then he kind of
I'm starting to convince myself.
That's lovely. You really do have a knack for saying something right as I'm about to start talking. It's almost unbelievable how good you are at that.
I've had a few years' experience. Moving along.
Yes, moving along. So then he goes on to state that God must be a simple being. And so a simple being is something that is exempt from change and it lacks extemporaneous parts. So basically, for God to exist, he must be free from all change because you cannot change the truth. It must be something eternal. It must always be constant, and that must be God.
I like to think of it as more of a singularity than something simple. Just like it has a singular essence, unchangeable.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I kind of had this.
Kind of tease us.
Yeah, so yes, you'll have to keep listening to figure out what I think about that.
All right.
And so with that, he kind of also states that we can't really give any attributes to God per se, because all divine attributes must be identical. Because if we say that he is good, but he's also wise, we can't really say that because God must be constant in Augustine's theory of things. God must be free from change. He must have all divine attributes. And so if they are all one, really God supremely is, and that is why he has those other divine attributes. Does that follow?
Yeah, it does. And I was just thinking, wouldn't it make equal sense if he was ever changing?
How so?
He was everything and everything else and forever changing.
Yes, but if he is everything, then you'd have to accept that God is evil as well as good. And I don't think Augustine would ever want to do that.
He would never do that. That's correct.
Yeah,
I like how his biblical reference to the philosophy, I am who I am.
I am who I am.
You're getting to that. But,
that's what I was about to say. He says that God supremely is, and that is why he has all those divine attributes in that he just is, and that is basically his one attribute that has all the other attributes in it.
Yeah, when I was younger, I didn't get the I am who I am, but as I got older, I like this whole singularity. He is the being, the essence.
He is.
Right.
And so, like you were saying about evil, he kind of doesn't say that, he says that evil is not a thing that is caused. Right. Evil is simply a loss of good, because he believes that God can never cause anything that isn't good, but we can choose to basically have a lack of good in our lives, and that is what evil is.
Right, it's kind of the same way to describe my cold beverage in this, Lord of the Rings mug.
Yes.
It is not cold, it just has a lack of heat.
Yes, exactly.
I think it's about
out of an identical mug.
I think it is. It better not be identical. I have a beer in mine.
Well, mine has grapefruit juice. But yes.
But I think I understand his theory, but I don't know that it necessarily follows because. I like that he has a description of it. It makes sense. It's a universal theory that evil is not a separate being or essence. It's just a privation or a lack of good. It's clean. The argument's clean. I like it.
And then he also kind of goes on.
I disagree with that. I think I've interrupted you again. Yes. I think there is evil. I think people are evil. And I think if there are, I still haven't come to figure out if I really believe in Satan.
Really?
Yeah. Do you?
I don't know.
That's always been a hard one for me to get around because I kind of have this laissez-faire attitude about God. I don't think he's going to be taking an active role in our lives. We discussed that before. And it doesn't seem fair that he allow Satan or some other being stronger than us, some supernatural being, to trick us into doing things. Yeah. It just seems a little illogical to me. But it's in the Bible and stuff, so I don't know.
Yes, then Augustine also kind of discusses, because there's a big point of contention, if God makes good, why doesn't he make everything equally good?
Right.
And Augustine does state that, yes, some good things are better than others. Some people have more good attributes than other people, and that is just the way that it is, and just good that it is that way. For other people to do things that other people can't.
It reminds me, I was listening to a podcast of Joe Rogan on the way to work today. He was talking with Marcus Luttrell, who was he was in that movie. He was a SEAL. And they had a mission gone awry and he got rescued. Lone survivor. And they were discussing like what gives happiness. It was a really kind of a deep conversation. And they're talking about the examples everybody uses about the seasons. You don't appreciate the warm summer days unless you've had the cold winter days.
Yes.
And if you've been deprived of, Joe Rogan was talking about a hunting trip. It rained for 6 days straight and he was in a wet sleeping bag. And he said he was almost the happiest day of his life was when he was back in Los Angeles, took a hot shower and was able to just walk around in the sun. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. Similar type of argument is this, is that, the different values or different attributes or qualities of people or the world and animals and that stuff gives value to the other things that have a different value. Because if they're all the same, then there would be no beauty because there'd be nothing to compare it to.
Yes.
I think it's the same argument.
I think that's also a case for why God is good, because a lot of the times if you're arguing that God is evil, you're saying, well, there's evil in the world. How could a good God let that happen? And I think your same argument applies there. Without some evil, there would be no good.
Right, and that's why God could be evil, because without good, there would be no evil.
That's also true.
Right, because you wouldn't appreciate the evil if there wasn't some good.
That's true.
Because you just give up. You'd be like, everything's evil. Yeah. But it's that sliver of hope that keeps you in this tortured realm.
Yes. That's lovely. So going on with the tortured realm, Augustine says that we inherit our sinfulness from Adam's original sin.
Does this get into the predestination thing?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing.
I don't know why he thought of this. It was a good argument. And then he gets really tied up at the end of his life.
Let me explain the argument first before you start commentating on it. He basically says that we need grace to get out of sin. There's nothing we can do without grace, but it is always predestined who has grace and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think
why is that?
That is a terrible argument.
Yeah.
I don't understand it at all. I don't know why that has to be a thing.
Right.
I think that goes against basically everything Augustine really understands about God, because if he believes that there's a good God, why would a good God make sure that some people are going to hell?
Right.
And not give his grace to everybody?
Right. Maybe there's a limited supply or something. There's a closeout.
Shortage in heaven.
Yes. Yeah. It just doesn't make any logical sense that he... What was that? Was that the prevailing view of the church at the time? Is that where he's getting that stuff from?
I don't know.
Because I don't think that was true either. It just seems like such an unnecessary argument to get caught up in. Mm-hmm. I mean, why would you even argue about predestination? It's just another form of determinism.
Yeah.
Determinism. And you can't have free will if you have predestination. I mean, there's all sorts of holes in that. There are obvious holes in that argument.
And even when some philosophers tried to give him a way for free will to still fit in that, because other philosophers were like, well, can somebody refuse God's grace if he offers it to them? And he says, no.
Right.
You can't refuse it.
Doubles down.
Yeah, even there's no free will. And it's that just doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah, I don't get it, but I mean, that's what he thought. So it's interesting to know that St. Augustine was a dummy on some subjects.
There's no point in arguing with him now.
I'm smarter than St. Augustine on predestination. So are you.
So we had in other people's faces. No clue what I'm talking about.
But the ones that do, you either are impressed or scared of them.
Yes, that's very true. Moving on to Boethius. Boethius on divine foreknowledge. So
which makes me think of a character from the Lord of the Rings. Was there a Boethius? Wouldn't he get the one that had all the arrows in the chest?
That was Boromir.
Boromir. Okay, that wasn't Boethius.
Close. Not quite. So there's a Bilbo.
One cannot just walk into heaven. I don't know. What was it?
One cannot simply walk into Mordor. Mordor is not heaven. I think it's about as opposite as you can get there.
I have this is the section about
your argument, yes.
Consolation of Smaug.
What?
That's a section. No, Consolation of Philosophy.
Oh, close. Not at all, but okay.
Well, that's a Desolation of Smaug.
Yes, Desolation of Smaug.
Smaug.
Yes, right. Smaug, not Smog. Smaug.
I have that written in my notebook. The Consolation of Smaug.
That's fantastic.
Under Boethius. Divine foreknowledge.
Yes, we have stated the title of this section many times.
Explain it.
Yeah, so there's this big question, if God...
This is your question. This is what we've argued about.
You don't say. If God knows everything, do we have freedom? So if God, knows past, present, future, how can we have free will? And so Boethius kind of makes the argument that knowledge does not cause what is known. So if I observe something, if I observe that you are sitting, my knowledge that you are sitting did not cause you to sit.
That was your argument, right?
Yes, that was one of my arguments.
Mm-hmm.
And so he also states then that God is outside time and his seeing is not foreseeing. So if we put that sort of time on God, we completely misunderstand the concept of God's knowledge of us. And that was also my argument that I made, that God is outside time.
Yes.
And so we cannot argue in terms of time when discussing his knowledge.
You and Boethius are like blood brothers.
Yes.
I mean, you're coming up with his stuff now off the top of your head.
Yeah.
That's kind of impressive.
Thank you.
Of course, he died hundreds of years ago, and he already thought of all that, but it's pretty impressive that you came up with it. Yeah, I think you kind of convinced me
Really?
Of that.
Really?
But I still think that God doesn't necessarily have to know
Okay.
the future. In fact, I'm convinced that God doesn't know the future.
Well, then you don't agree with me.
I agree with the theory.
Okay, but God knows everything if God is outside of time. So like Boethius says here, so God possesses the whole of his life simultaneously.
Yes.
None of it has flowed into the past, and none of it is still waiting in the wings. So there is no past or future for God. Everything.
I agree with that.
Yes. So then how does that...
Because the reality is created within time. And so he knows it when it happens. But he can't he knows it all, but he only knows it when it happens.
That doesn't make any sense.
It makes every sense in the world.
That doesn't make any sense. How can you know when it happens if it has both already happened and not happened yet?
He will only know it when it happens, because the actions of humans are being created when they happen, and
Yes.
they aren't necessarily created until they happen.
Yes, like there's nothing that is forcing me to do my actions. Yes, that
Right.
follows. So explain your next point again.
I don't know if I have a next point.
Well, your point about God doesn't know the future.
Well, he doesn't really, because
Okay.
future doesn't exist.
Yes. So is that it? Is that the whole point?
That's the whole
okay,
thing.
Yeah, that's
the
okay.
future doesn't exist
Yes.
until it is present.
It doesn't. Yes, it doesn't exist to God because it has.
Doesn't exist. Period. Hasn't been
Okay.
created yet.
Okay.
It's just like it's at one point the universe didn't exist and God created it.
Okay. I follow that.
So like what you're going to do today hasn't happened yet. It isn't created. You haven't made those decisions yet. You have
Yes.
complete and total free will.
Yes.
So I don't think God can know what you're going to do tomorrow because you haven't yet done it and you haven't decided what to do. It hasn't happened. I don't care if he's in time or outside of time. It didn't exist.
Okay. I'm not sure what to say to that. I mean, I still think that the future has both already happened for God and has not already happened because he is outside of time.
It has not happened at all. Whether you're in time or outside of time.
But then
time is a physical
Yes.
manifestation. But just because it's physical doesn't mean it existed.
Yes. Okay.
That's my argument.
Yeah.
I'm not articulating it as well as
Yeah.
I should. I don't even know if I understand it as well as I should.
Yeah.
But that's my theory, and I'm sticking with it. Is that there really is no effective foreknowledge.
Yes.
Because you can't know something that doesn't exist.
Yes. To us, it does not
It
exist.
doesn't exist for God either.
How so?
How can it exist? You haven't done it yet.
Because he is outside of the boundaries of that time.
Sure.
Yes.
So?
And so he is outside of the boundary of it having to happen.
No, that's not true.
Yes.
Why is he outside of the requirement that it actually exist?
Because he is beyond that point where it has happened.
There is no point beyond which it has happened.
So then you're putting a limit on God.
I'm not putting a limit on God.
Yes, you are. For him, yes, you are.
What's the limitation? He can only be aware of things that are in existence. That's not a limitation, is it?
Yes, but you are putting the bound on existence as what has already happened or what is happening now.
Correct.
Okay.
But that's the nature of existence.
Not necessarily if there is no now, then, or future.
Well, I know there's a now. I know there's a then.
Yes, but
we don't know if there's going to be a future.
But God does.
How does he know that?
Because he is outside of the bounds of now, then, and future.
I don't know if he's outside the bounds of future.
Yes. Why not?
Why would he be?
Because I thought you just agreed to me that
I agree
he's
that's the
outside
theory.
of time. Yes.
Well, he's outside of time, yes. Yes.
And so if
He
he's
doesn't
outside
age.
of
He's not a physical being.
so if he's outside of time, how is he still bound by the future?
Because the future doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist is what I'm saying.
Okay, yes.
Period.
Okay.
There is no future. Physically
So then God is just present
and past.
and past. But then why can you go infinitely back with God and not infinitely forward?
Because it's already happened. It's in existence.
And so God
There's
there's no
there's
guarantee that God will exist tomorrow.
Well, there's no guarantee there is a tomorrow. So, correct.
So you're saying that God is only infinitely past and not infinitely future.
Past and present.
Okay, that is a strange theory.
Why is that a strange theory? The
Because
future,
if you could agree that
the
he
future
goes,
is nothing.
Yes, but if you
There's
could,
nothing in the future.
But if you agree that he goes infinitely back, I don't see how you can't also agree that he goes infinitely forward.
Why do I have to agree to that?
Well, let's say we go infinitely back.
Yes.
Then there is also infinitely forward ahead of us.
No, there isn't.
Yes, there is.
Well, first of all,
Because
you
if I've
can't,
gone-
can't go infinitely back.
Well, yes, this is a hypothetical situation. I can't go infinitely back.
Yeah,
But if
God can.
if God goes infinitely back, then
Yes.
there's infinitely more ahead of him.
No, because he was there at the same
But
time.
he's gone infinitely back.
There's no difference to him from the past and the present.
Okay. And so why is there a difference between the present and the future?
Because it hasn't happened yet.
This is so weird. This is I think the strangest theory you had.
This is the most simplistic theory I've ever espoused.
Okay.
I'm sticking to this one.
Yeah, I could tell.
Yeah, this one I think I'm firmly convinced
Okay.
on.
Well,
And then if I just make the argument that there is no future until it is present,
yeah.
which means there's no future,
Yes.
then I don't have to worry about any of this omnipotent nonsense about him knowing what's going to happen.
Okay.
It doesn't. He doesn't not know it
Yeah.
because it doesn't exist.
Okay.
How can you fault the creator for not knowing something that hasn't been created?
I don't know.
Can he know something that has not been created? Doesn't his knowledge of it cause it to be in existence?
Yeah, I think we get into that a little bit later. So I think we should
I'm getting into it right now, and I think I made a good point.
You did.
Yes, thank
Yes.
you. Ooh, I conceded that his father made a good point.
Yes. I'm not sure I agree with you, but it is.
No, I'm not
a good
saying
one.
you
Yes.
should. You know, I've wrestled with this a little bit. I think you've really caused me to think a lot about the time and his foreknowledge and his not being in time, and what does that mean practically. I'm using he as a gender neutral for all those people that care about that.
Yes.
And I'm not convinced that God's a male.
Moving on to a slightly different topic, but this little argument here has made me kind of I'd kind of define God as a zero-dimensional being. Because if we have God, right, we have kind of like the four dimensions as most people think of them, you know, length, width, depth, and then time. And so if we remove time from God, and, you know, God doesn't have any physical presence, so we can kind of remove length, width, and depth. And so God must be like a zero-dimensional being, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know what relevance that has, but I
Yeah,
just kind of
that's an interesting.
came to that idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's
Tautology.
present in all things and present in no things, I guess, at the same time, if he has zero dimensions. You're not
I'd
confused?
say he's beyond dimensions.
Beyond dimensions, yes.
That's why I wouldn't say he's no dimensions. He's all dimensions.
Dimensions, yes.
He's multi-dimensional. Unidimensional.
No, unidimensional would be a point.
That's correct.
Yes. All right, moving on. Negative theology in Eriugena. And so he really just talks about the use of words to describe God.
This is SCOTUS.
Scotus Eriugena.
Yes.
So different Scotus than Duns Scotus. Yes. And so he says that the words we use to describe God have opposites, but God has no opposites. So he basically says we can never really describe God because, you know, if we say God is good, you know, there would have to be an opposite to that. And there's no such thing as the opposite of God.
Right.
So God is everything. We cannot say that the non-God is bad. You know, for us to put an adjective on something, there has to be an opposite of that something to have the opposite
There's
of that
some
adjective.
amount of logic to this.
Yes,
I kind
I
of
think
like
that
that part of the argument.
Yes.
I also like that he was condemned about 350 years later by the then Pope.
Yeah, that's fun.
There's a series of condemnations.
Oh.
Oh yeah, because we forgot to mention that Augustine condemned Augustine, condemned Pelagius. That was mentioned in the book too. Yeah, so we skipped over. I have it underlined. He condemned him.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah, I am always interested in the condemnations.
We should still condemn people.
I completely agree.
Really?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm a big proponent of bullying,
Yes.
shaming,
Yes.
and now condemnation.
Can you elaborate?
I probably shouldn't.
I think you should. I think now that you have said that statement, it is best if you defend your position.
When you don't condemn, and we really do have condemnations now, and the condemnations are one-sided in our main society, with regard to social media and that kind of stuff. So if you're a Trump supporter, you're condemned by the powers that be that oppose him. But I think in a lot of ways, and I don't mean like serious violent bullying, but there's no getting around bullying by children. It is a natural societal reaction to the outliers, and it has a certain correcting function to keep people in a certain order. And I don't mean that people should get abused and that kind of stuff, but the fact that there is that if somebody in your high school were to say the most vile and disgusting things to you, they can pretty much do it all day long, 7 days a week. But as soon as you punched them once in the nose to do that self-correcting, societal correcting mechanism, which would stop that name calling and insulting, you'd be kicked out of school for at least 10 days. So you've stopped the bullying.
Depends on who I hit.
I don't know. And I mean, it does depend on who the person is that's hitting. You can't go around punching people every day.
Yes.
But there's no sort of meaningful peer policing, and there's no shame anymore with people's activities. I mean, there's no except for that now they're trying to shame people that have traditional Christian values. But it doesn't work because we don't care. But as far as deviant behavior, you can't even say anything's deviant, and so everybody can just do whatever they want. That's just anarchism, and you're seeing a lot of the same. I've been thinking about this a lot. You're seeing a lot of the trends that you see when civilizations fall, and there's some repeating themes, and one of them is gender fluidity. You saw that like in the ancient Greek empires before they implode, the Roman Empire for sure. All sorts of sexual depravity and gender bending and guys acting like girls and girls acting like guys. And it's like, I don't know what it is about large societies that are going to implode, but that's like one of the last steps. And then the outside forces take advantage of the crumbling moral decay and lack of preparation on the part of the weird society that's become obsessed with trivialities, and they get conquered, or at least destroyed as a functioning society.
So you're telling me I should be on the lookout in the near future for 50 senators to stab the president?
Won't take that many. You don't think that would happen?
It's possible.
I think given the opportunity, if Trump were reelected, I'm surprised he has survived his first term, quite frankly. I thought for sure the guy was going to get assassinated. I would put money on it. If he gets back in a couple of years...
That'd be interesting if he did, because it'd probably be the same reasons why Caesar was killed. I mean, he definitely declared himself dictator, an emperor,
right?
And the senators stabbed him for the purpose of restoring, the republic and restoring dignity and everything. But that kind of just caused it to fall much quicker.
That's correct, because it was just illegal and usurping what had been the authority. Yeah, but I don't think that line of reasoning would flow too
work,
well.
Yeah, because
but if the Democrats were to, like, there's all sorts of things about unconstitutional reforms, as they call them. If a group of senators got together and hastened Joe Biden's death, I think the argument would be a little bit better if he goes crazy like the next 2 years. Yeah. But of course, same analogy would apply if Trump went crazy, because if he came back, who knows what he's going to want to do? He's going to want to settle scores, and that's dangerous too. That's no good. As Ann Coulter would say, we need Trumpism without Trump. And she was a big supporter of Trump. You should Google Ann Coulter on that Bill Maher show. We'll watch it later tonight.
All right. Because
they ask her, who it was during the Republican primary, Trump's Republican primary, who is the most likely person to win the presidency out of the current Republican candidates? And she says, Donald Trump. And the entire audience and the panel just laughed at her mercilessly. And she just kind of looked at him and a year later, she was right.
Wow.
Anyway, I went on a complete
yes,
sidebar on that
back to Eriugena real quick. There's only one more thing I want to mention in this section. He states that God does not know what he is. And I thought that was very interesting, kind of stating that, God cannot describe himself even because he is not a what. He is not a thing that can be described. So even it is beyond God's ability to describe himself, because once you put attributes on God, he kind of limit him in a way, I guess.
I think he's right that the descriptions of God would limit him too much, and they aren't appropriate, and we can't really have true knowledge of what God is because it's beyond our knowledge. But I'm pretty sure God can figure it out. I'm sure there's a God word for what God is that we can't pronounce. But yeah, it's like I am who am.
He just is.
I am is.
Yes.
Right.
All right, moving on to Islamic arguments for God's existence.
If we must.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and so
I didn't find these very persuasive. But,
I just want to kind of summarize these.
They're similar. Yeah.
There's first Al-Kindi. He said that the universe must be finite in space and in time, because he says that if the universe is infinite, if we take a chunk out of it and move it somewhere else, does that make the first infinity less? And then do we have like a second infinity, the chunk that we pulled out? And he says, well, that's kind of impossible, so it must be finite. It must have a beginning as well, because if we cannot go infinitely forward and infinitely back in time, basically. Right. So there must be a beginning, there must be a root cause, a root source for everything.
And that would be God.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And then also Avicenna, he says that God created out of necessity of his goodness.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
I thought that was very interesting.
I don't really agree with it, but he just radiates goodness necessarily.
Yes. Yeah, so he's basically saying if God is good, it is necessary for him to have created because goodness proliferates.
Boy, that's just not true.
Really? You think so?
I don't know. Do you think goodness proliferates? Do you think so?
I don't know.
I'm becoming a real cynic.
Maybe not in humans.
Well, then who? If we're the divine, we're the image of God.
No, we're the fallen image of God.
Yeah. So, well, what do you think? You haven't answered.
I think it is possible if God is supremely good. I think it is true that he would have to create. I think it is true. Pure goodness would proliferate. I don't think evil would ever create, is the thing. So I think evil really only destroys. And so if God was evil, I don't think anything would have been created. So I think it is necessary that God must be good. And if he is good, he must have created.
Interesting argument.
Yes.
I'm not going to argue with you.
All right. And he also states that the world is eternal if God is eternal. So he kind of disagrees with Al-Kindi. He says that everything, if God created everything, and you can't really put a stopping point on God, you can't put a specific point in time on God. Basically, the universe must also be infinite.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which I don't really buy that.
Yeah, because I think he can snap his fingers theoretically or metaphorically, and
yes,
and then end this universe and create a new one.
Yeah,
he'd still be around.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got bored.
Yeah. Anselm?
Yes.
Anselm's proof of God. So this is very interesting to me. It was hard to understand for a little bit, but I kind of got there in the end. He says that the very concept of God makes manifest that he exists. So he says that God is not conceivable. He is greater than anything that can be conceived. And so with that, he's saying, if I tell you to prove to me that God does not exist, right? If we say that God exists somewhere, how can you possibly prove that he does not exist? Because if you're saying that he does not exist, then, what are you even arguing against? How can you argue against something that you don't think exists, if that makes sense?
Yes.
And so then he's also saying that, if you're arguing at all about whether or not God exists, then he must exist, because you cannot argue about a non-existent concept. He has to exist because he exists as a concept.
Yeah, I get the argument, but I don't know that it's necessarily true. Do you think so? I mean, just because I argue about a concept doesn't make the concept exist. I mean, I guess the concept exists, but it doesn't physically exist necessarily. Yeah. But I guess God is a concept.
Because he kind of puts it like it's different than arguing about anything else physical that must exist, because there's nothing else, if it doesn't exist, say he brings up like the most beautiful island, Mm-hmm. If I say, prove to me that the most beautiful island does not exist, if I can prove that does not exist, nothing else collapses because of that. Nothing is dependent on that beautiful island existing other than just me being wrong or right. But if you prove that God does not exist, everything else is contingent upon that, basically. He's the one concept that is universal and infinite.
Yeah, I understand this argument, but I don't know that's necessarily true.
Yes, and I probably explained it pretty badly.
No,
but
I think you did. I think you did a great job. I do. I mean, I don't know what our listener thinks, but I think that is the argument, and it's just kind of hard to say that it must be. You know, it's not. It's to me, it's like an argument that it can be. I don't see that it's really convincing that it must be, that God must exist.
Well, he kind of restates it here, probably in simpler words than I put it. He says, if he does not have the concept of God, then he does not know what he is denying. If he has the concept of God, then he is contradicting himself. So to even argue against God, you have to have an understanding of the concept of God. But if you have the concept of God, you must have some belief that he exists.
I understand that.
Yes.
I think you explained it well the first time.
Oh, okay.
You explained it well the second time.
Thank you.
I'm still not convinced that it. What do you think? Do you think that proves the existence of God?
I don't think it necessarily proves the existence of God. I think it's a decent argument. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
In if a concept makes a thing manifest. I don't know if I would be convinced by it if I was an atheist.
Right.
I think there's much better proofs for God, but
Yeah.
I think it is an interesting line of thinking.
Yeah, it's kind of persuasive.
Yes.
In a way, but
If you really think about it for a while.
right. But it's not like, oh, it has to be. Oh, you've now convinced me. Otherwise, I would,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen how the error of my ways. But I don't.
Yes.
I don't think it's like one of those kind of
Mm-hmm.
arguments. You want to talk about Abelard and
Damiani?
Damiani?
Yes, omnipotence in Damiani and Abelard. So Peter Damiani, he says that God cannot do bad things. Anything else is possible for him. So he basically says God can do anything except if it's wrong, essentially.
Why is that?
I don't know. I guess he's just operating under the assumption that God must be good.
Yeah, God is good, and therefore everything he does must be good.
Yes.
I don't see how that follows.
He also says that God cannot contradict himself, and basically what will be will be. So if God wants to do something, he'll do it. If God doesn't want to do something, he won't. It's a very simple view of God, I guess.
Yes.
He does what he wants, and he is good. And if what he wants is good, then it happens.
Right. I don't know. Yeah. I don't. Again, I don't see how it's not convincing to me.
Abelard states a similar thing. He says that whatever God wants to do, he can. Whatever he doesn't want to, he can't. So he's physically incapable of doing something that he doesn't want to do.
I find that completely contrary.
Yeah.
I guess. Well, I mean, so the obvious is, in a religious context, if we believe in God and Jesus and all that, did he want Jesus to get crucified? No. But I guess you'd say yes, to
save
I don't
humanity.
think there's a desire for it. He allowed it.
Yeah. I don't know.
It was necessary, maybe, for the covenant, but I don't think he enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I don't think he wanted that.
I don't think he wanted to die, no.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I guess it'd be his son,
yes.
so like the creator, the Trinity. Speaking from a father, I don't care what you say. I'm never signing up for that. I don't care about any greater good. You nail my son to a cross, you crazy?
Abelard also...
Which brings up the evil God thing, too. My
No,
gosh,
no.
what is he doing with his son? Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
What kind of God does that?
I mean, to save everybody else, I guess.
Really? Couldn't he just say, "Yeah, you're saved"? Kind of like he did with guy who's going to kill his son. The Old Testament.
Abraham,
Abraham.
right? Yeah.
No.
No?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Abraham was
Yes,
going to
Isaac, yes.
to kill his son. But he stopped him right at the last second. Now you know now I know you really meant it. Why can't he just do that with his son, Jesus? Couldn't
Well, I
he?
mean, wasn't that an argument made like way back a few chapters ago? In that human sin, there's infinite human sin, and so if somebody has to die to make up for human sin, it has to be an infinite being to make up for the infinite sins.
Yeah, I get that.
Yes.
But I'm pretty sure if God really wanted to just forgive everybody's sins, he could have just done it.
Well, isn't that Augustine's idea that you didn't like?
What's that?
Why doesn't he just give grace to everybody?
Well, yeah, he could.
Yeah.
Right.
So why doesn't he? Why?
Well, if he did, we wouldn't have free will.
Yeah.
The argument against it is that if he's giving it out, he's saying he's giving it out to, and it's a done deal.
Yeah.
But that's a different argument about free will. But I got to talk about that too. But
Yes.
but I just don't get why. From if I don't really try to put myself in God's shoes, but I mean, why do you have to allow that to happen? I guess it goes along with my theory that he doesn't generally meddle. He's only meddled a couple times. Yeah. And one was the birth of his son, and that didn't end out very well for, Jesus. But I guess it was temporary.
He came back after 3 days.
It was one day. Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, sorry I'm bad-mouthing God.
That's all right. That's all I have to say about Damiani and Abelard. Did you want to mention anything about gross test?
No, other than it's boring.
Yes. It basically says nothing can change if all is known.
I wonder if that's where the word grotesque came from.
I highly doubt it.
Oh, okay.
But I guess it's possible, though.
I was not interested in that at all.
Yes.
Aquinas.
Aquinas on God's eternal knowledge and power. So he says that God's knowledge is not expressed through prepositions the same way ours is. So we cannot really put limits on God's knowledge. We cannot. It's a similar argument to before in that we cannot give a time to God's knowledge because there's nothing that acts upon it really.
Right. What did you think about his proofs of God, the 5 ways? And
we're skipping right to that.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
I mean, that's the next little section.
Is there something else you wanted to say before that? I was asking you. Is like his 5 ways seem to be really 4 plus 1 ways, which is really it's like 4 of the ways were the same thing. That he's the first cause. I mean, didn't it seem like it was
very similar? Yeah.
What did you think?
We can move on.
Was it convincing?
I think they are very convincing.
Really?
I do like Aquinas' 5 ways.
Tell us why.
Well, I'm going to run through the 5 ways.
Yeah, run through them and explain why they're great.
Yeah, so the first is that motion in the world is only explicable if there is a first motionless mover. So basically, every motion is contingent on another motion. For me to move something, I have to push it, and then where did I get that energy? What came from my muscles? And we can go all the way back to, what made the first motion. Second, the series of efficient causes in the world must lead to an uncaused cause. So this is different from motion. 3.
So it's the exact same thing, but go ahead.
Number 3. Contingent incorruptible beings must depend on an independent and incorruptible being. So this one's actually is different from the first 2. Basically stating that, if we are dependent on something else and we are also, fallible to the ways of the world, there has to be something out there that doesn't rely on anything and is incorruptible for us, for there to be anything to corrupt, I guess. So for something to exist, there has to be its opposite. Yes. Number 4, yes, the varying degrees of reality and goodness in the world must be approximations to a subsisted maximum of reality and goodness. So what we see as good and what we see as real are dependent on a higher level of real, a higher level of good that exists.
Isn't that really just Plato's forms again?
But go ahead. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Number 5, the ordinary teleology of non-conscious agents in the universe entails the existence of an intelligent universal orderer. So basically stating similar to what we heard before, if all the planets move in such a regulated, precise way, if the whole
intelligent
world...
design.
Intelligent design. If the whole world
So it really is something had to be the first cause and the intelligent design theory.
Yes.
Isn't that really what he's got going on?
I think so. Basically.
Yeah.
I like the proofs, though. I mean... The first 4 all kind of mold into the same one.
Right.
I think you could kind of combine them all into one to make a more proving single proof, I guess. But I do like those proofs. I think they are good proofs.
They remind me of when we went to that frozen custard place. You had you can get the chocolate or the vanilla, or you can get the swirl. So like the 4 of them were like a 4 mix of swirl.
That's
they all add to the argument, they add to the ice cream flavor, but they're all ice cream.
Yes.
Well, in this case, frozen yogurt.
I do like those proofs, though. I think they are good proofs for God's existence. Would you be convinced if you were an atheist?
About the first cause theory. Yes. I mean, it's. I think it's one of the better ones.
Yes.
Just because, who started this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm more as I get older, I'm more convinced by the intelligent design.
Really?
Well, it's like the more you know, as NBC would say, back in the 80s, the more you realize how complex and ordered the world is at a physical, it's complex, but it's also simple. It's just, the universal laws of physics.
The intelligent design argument opens up a lot of arguments against it, though.
Really?
Yeah, I think so, because if you could say, well, if everything works this perfectly out in the world and everything is aligned to this motion, then how is there still evil if a God exists that can put such great things into being, such great ordered things? I think that's an argument against that. And I think it's very hard to argue against all of the, prime cause arguments without, going like really into the technical side of things. Like Kenny points here to like some of the arguments against these, and they really seem kind of trivial just based on the terminology that Aquinas used. But I think it's very hard to argue against that there had to be something that created all of it first, because, we've been proven time and time again that something cannot come from nothing.
Yeah, except for we're just talking about the physical realm, and we know time is physical. So how do we know that there is a beginning to the time, because it's just physical? Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you bend the time argument around on itself, it's like it never did start, because that's just a physical manifestation. It's just like distance. Yeah. So it messes with the cause and effect equation. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't have time, you don't have cause and effect. Yeah. Because it's all being or is, or you could reverse it, that kind of stuff. And so it's a good argument. I'm not mm-hmm. saying it's not a good argument, but I think there's ways to say, well, there's always a previous cause. Yeah. Or it cycles through. It just resets, which is like one of the arguments in
Star Trek?
The Matrix.
Oh.
Matrix.
Are you going to say Star Trek? Usually you bring up Star Trek.
Well, they had time travel in Star Trek in several different episodes in some of the movies. Yeah. One of the better Star Trek movies, which are all very corny. I've rewatched a couple of them fairly recently, and they're really corny.
The old ones? Or?
Yeah, like with Kirk. I mean, the original Kirk,
mm-hmm.
William Shatner.
Yes.
Great actor. Better singer. Yes, anyway, we're off on a complete tangent there. We can move back to whatever we're doing.
Duns Scotus?
Yes.
Metaphysical proof of an infinite being?
I have first cause part 2.
Yes, basically.
Yeah.
Nothing cannot cause anything, so there must be a first cause. He also says that if it is possible, it must exist. He's talking about God here, so if it is possible that if there is a first cause, then it must exist. If we even allow for that possibility, it has to be a thing that exists.
It seems like it's just a kind of a more elaborate or more expounded on the same argument.
Yes.
It seems like.
He also mentions that infinity is the divine attribute. So basically, the other people arguing about whether or not you can use words to describe God, and he says, well, the only word you can use is infinite. That applies to all the other attributes. He's infinitely good, infinitely wise.
Infinitely smelly.
I don't know about that one.
Why not? Wouldn't he have all the smells?
I don't know.
Oh.
If he's not physical, I don't know. Would he have a smell?
How could he not have all the smells?
I didn't think we'd be talking about a smelly God today.
Well, I mean, if he's everything,
I guess.
And yeah, he can't be nothing. He can't not smell.
Yeah. Well, can he?
I don't know. If he's everything and all encompassing and infinite.
Out of the millions of words that Aquinas wrote, I bet one of those is about whether or not God smells or not. Yeah. To look into that.
Yes. Smell you later.
And then Duns Scotus also says that the decree of God's will is eternal, but execution of decree has place in time. So basically, so if God makes something happen, it's always necessary that something will happen because God made it happen. But the exact point that it happened, the execution of that decree has a place in time. It's like Abraham and Isaac, God telling Abraham not to kill his son. It was always going to happen that God was going to tell Abraham not to kill his son, but there was a specific execution point in time where Abraham was about to kill his son that the decree occurred.
I still think that's cruel.
Yeah. But if it is always true that he was going to tell him not to kill his son, is it still cruel?
It is cruel leading up to it.
I think it's
kind of a form of torture.
I've kind of come around to your side there. Yeah, that's very cruel.
And then once you buy into that argument, that's the dangerous thing about overthinking. So sometimes it's better just to go to church and not even think about these things.
I don't know if that's the message you should be
well, because if you start, you get a certain. When you have these kind of debates or discussions, there's a certain amount of arrogance that you got to catch yourself in, where you're judging God, and it's like you got to be careful on what path you go down, because if you start judging God, then you're going to stop believing, or you're going to hold yourself out as a god, and I know better than everybody. And
Yeah.
I'm now, as I'm 50, I'm wary of those kind of arguments about the fallibility of God. But I think what I'm going to come down to on that one eventually, just to justify it consistently with my other beliefs, is that there was an error in the telling of the story. So it's more of like a fable, like the Greek god stories, because it just doesn't compute to me, because I do believe in a good God.
Yes.
That God's going to do that, because it's just cruel to the guy. I mean, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And I really don't think, I really don't think that there was a covenant between God and the Jews because of that almost sacrifice of Abraham's son. I don't buy into that, that whole argument. And so, because I view a lot of the Old Testament as instructional as opposed to literal.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's blasphemy or not, but I don't believe in the literal truth of everything that's in the Old Testament.
There is a decent case for that because, just depending on the various genres of writing that's even in there,
right.
It's hard to tell what's like hyperbole and
Correct.
what's, exaggerations to, kind of fit the narrative, basically.
Right.
I guess I shouldn't say fit the narrative, but fit like the feel and the attitude of the writing.
Right. So I think I'm coming down on that one because I've been thinking about that a lot since we were talking about it in the podcast. That I just don't think that God, again, played that sort of active role, saying, "Hey, buddy, come over here, and how about you kill your kid?" Oh my God, you're really willing to do it?
Yeah.
Or myself.
Yeah.
You're really gonna kill that kid? Okay, we got a deal.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is like a shitty thing to do. Oh, pardon my language.
If anybody listened to the last episode, I don't know if they really
I thought you edited that out.
There's no way. There's no way I could edit all of that out. I don't have any editing experience. There's so many.
All right. Are we on to Scotus, Ockham, and Valla?
Valla? Yeah, probably.
Valla? Bob Villa? Divine foreknowledge.
So Scotus, he argues against this argument of Aquinas. And Aquinas kind of put forth this analogy of these men walking on a road. If you have a hill behind you, you can't see the people on the other side of that hill, but you're still walking on that hill. But if somebody's on a higher hill, they can see all of the people on that same road at the same time. And that's kind of how he put God's place in time, and that we're kind of mistaken. If we're the people on that road, we cannot see the people behind us. If there's a hill, we cannot see the people in front of us if there's a hill in front of us. But the person on the higher hill overlooking all of us, they are the God outside of time. They can see everybody on the road at the same time. And so Scotus argues against that, saying that the way things appear to God is the way they actually are. So we cannot say that, just because my judgment is clouded, that is how things are to me. Just the way that things appear to God, just that is the way.
Right. This is the way.
Yes. He said that determinism and freedom can be reconciled in that sort of sense, in that God still makes things happen, but we are free to make those things happen. I didn't really follow his argument here. I don't think determinism and freedom could ever be really reconciled like that.
Not hard determinism, which causes us to do things. I mean,
so he kind of argues for a weak determinism, which is.
I mean, there is some truth to all that, because there are physical forces that, biologically we react certain ways and we perceive things and all that. So
yeah,
and if somebody startles you, you're just going to react. So there's always some of that in there, and your mood is sometimes dependent even on your diet and stuff.
Yeah.
And so you may do things differently, but I think when you're talking about philosophically,
I don't think
it's hard to reconcile any sort of determinism or predestination with free will. It's kind of like either you're in it or you're out. You either believe in that we have the choice to do these things without influence, or we don't. Otherwise we don't have sin. Because if we're on marionette strings, I guess that would be an example. Like maybe he's pulling a bunch of the strings, but we can move some of them ourselves, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe.
That's really kind of like the argument of it.
Yeah. And Ockham states that God knows all future contingents. So anything that may happen in the future, God already knows it. Which I know you distinctly disagree with.
I disagree with that, yes. But we've been through that.
Yes, we've been through that. He also states that it is better to ask what keeps something in existence than to ask, what began existence. So he's kind of saying
What's
that
the sustaining
the better
force?
better way to prove that God exists is to acknowledge that there is something keeping us all in existence. He doesn't really elaborate too much, but that's just what he says.
No, he's just pulling that out of his hat.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what you'd call it, but yeah. Then Lorenzo Valla, he kind of just put things in a weird sort of way. Different analogies kind of describe God. He uses the examples of Greek gods. He says with this man Tarquin, and that Apollo, the god of prophecy, he would predict Tarquin's fate if he dies or if he lives. But Jupiter is the one who decided it. So you cannot blame Apollo for predicting the future if Jupiter wasn't the one that decided it. But, Apollo and Jupiter both kind of exist in one Christian God in that sort of sense, and that God can also know the future while also causing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was clever, I guess.
And then he kind of just denounced nominalist scholasticism and humanist scholarship.
Yes.
So at the end of his big long book, he just says, "You're all wrong." Which I kind of like.
Yeah.
I think that's how we should end this podcast at some point. The last episode. You're all wrong.
Yes.
It's the final episode.
Well,
Goodbye.
That's what I end up doing when I was studying philosophy.
Really?
Yeah, it's just like, this is stupid. You guys don't know shit.
Language.
And I'm like, I'm getting a degree in nonsense field of study.
Yeah.
Because nobody has the answers to any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have the answers. I don't have the answers. None of these people, they studied. This was their life's work. They like Augustine, or however you want to pronounce it. How many words did he write? Millions of them?
That was Aquinas, but yeah.
Whichever.
Yeah.
And for what? Did he ever really?
For Lorenzo Valla to come along and say that he was just wrong.
Yeah, pound sand. But, did he really prove anything?
I don't know.
Did they? Did they prove that God existed? Did they prove what is just and right in the world?
Well, I mean, they got people to think about it, and I think that's commendable.
Why? It's a waste of time. Go out and sow your fields, man.
That was really cynical. That was incredibly cynical.
This is now you have foreknowledge of our final episode. The two of us just ranting and raving about this is a complete waste of time. 40-something episodes. God, I wish I had that time back.
Yeah.
Are we on to Nicholas of Cusa?
The informed ignorance of Nicholas of Cusa.
I like that. The informed ignorance.
Yes.
Gosh, these are great quotes. We need to have a line of clothing. What was the other one? The agent... Necessary agent? What, agent intelligence or something?
Agent intellect.
Agent intellect. Yes. Yeah. Actually, there should be superheroes. Yeah. So agent intellect.
Informed ignorance.
Informed. Yeah.
Lorenzo Valla. So he states that truth is the only reality. There's nothing that can change about truth. The truth is the only way, and that is the only thing that should be known, that can be known, is the truth. And I think that's very, true. I
also like Kenny's description of this guy's theory that learning is gradually increasing awareness of how much you don't know. And I think that's so true.
Yeah, and he basically, in this whole section, says we don't know anything about God. He says that we cannot measure the infinite against the finite, because anything we do, God is completely infinite. Any of our words, any of our experiences, emotions, those are completely finite. We cannot compare God to any of that.
I think he's closest to the truth out of this whole chapter here.
He also says that God is the minimum and the maximum. So just as, nothing can be bigger than God, so too nothing can be smaller than God. God is both the biggest and the smallest, I guess, or neither. He's the minimum and the maximum.
Ooh.
He also says that... He says that this was kind of interesting. Does
that make him the maximum or maxi minimum?
Those would be twin superheroes. Yeah.
The Siamese twins.
Yes.
Can you say that? Are they still call it the conjoined? I guess now. Can't call them Siamese. Yeah. I don't know why they were ever called. I guess there's somebody from Siam which is now what, Malaysia? No,
maybe
Siam's from. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't think.
I don't know.
Probably I offended our Siamese listener.
Yeah, so sorry. He makes an interesting point.
He held out for the episode 19.
Yeah, apologize.
I just lost him at the end of it.
He makes the case that a straight line is equal to an infinite circle. And this is kind of interesting because you have a circle, that's this big.
You're holding up your hands.
Yes, I'm holding up my hands in a circular shape. So imagine a circle about the shape of hands in the shape of a circle. And so basically, if you stretch out that diameter of this circle, but you keep the circumference the same, it becomes an oval. And if you stretch that diameter out to infinity, eventually the curve will disappear altogether because it'll be so long of an oval, it'll become a straight line. I don't remember how that relates to God. I just wrote straight line equals infinite circle, and I cannot remember how he related that to God, but I liked that.
But wouldn't one of the ancient philosophers say, well, you're going to be coming ever closer to a straight line, but you'll never get there?
Yeah, that was Zeno of Elea?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, good memory there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can't actually cross a field because you have to get halfway there, and then you have to get halfway there, and you have to get halfway there.
So that circle is always going to be a really, really narrow oval.
Yes. And so he kind of just closes this whole section, this whole medieval philosophy section, by stating that we are infinitely distant from naming God. There's no way we can get any closer to naming God because everything we do is finite. We cannot describe God in finite terms.
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I
Don't you
agree.
think so? I mean, I think it's worthy to study it, especially the ethics part of it.
Yes.
And I was getting a little negative earlier, but
yeah, it's a little cynical.
Well, it's not just cynical. It's just.
But there is a lot of cynicism in there.
Well, I don't know what it was earlier, but just because it's pointless doesn't mean you're a cynic, does it?
I don't know.
Cynicism, I think, is you believe everybody's going to fail you.
Yeah.
So you don't believe anybody really has true intentions. I think that's a major part of it.
It's the skeptics that I really hate.
Yes.
They believe that you can never know if somebody's going to fail you.
Yeah, they can never know anything, right?
Never know anything.
Yeah. There is no knowledge.
No knowledge. Everybody sucks.
No, I like these. I like this chapter. I think they really went in deep, a deep dive and trying their best to come to some sort of conclusion.
So next week, early modern philosophy.
Not late modern.
Not late modern.
Not mid modern.
Not mid modern.
Not postmodern.
No, not postmodern. That's art.
Postmodern art is not art.
All right,
but we'll have a different. That'll be our next podcast. What is art?
Oh boy!
And you're not going to say a guy with.
Oh yeah! All right.
Up on a wall.
Yes. Be hard to do a podcast about art.
I'm sure there's like a million of them.
Oh yeah, but without the visual part of it, I don't know. All right. Well.
Yeah. I bet you there are people doing it.
Yeah. Well, this has been Unlimited Opinions. Follow us on Twitter at capital U, lowercase LMTD, capital O, lowercase Pinions.
There's a big competition for the T-shirt giveaway.
There is. Nobody has earned it. Nobody has designed the T-shirt either. So.
Well, it doesn't matter. Do it.
So the T-shirt competition, just to reiterate, tweet us something interesting. We will take the most interesting tweet, and we will give you a free T-shirt. And right now, nobody has tweeted us. So if you tweet us anything at all, as of right now, your odds are very good for winning a free T-shirt that we have not designed yet.
Yes. I think, yes.
All right. Well, I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
And this has been Unlimited Opinions. Will you still be Mark Bishop tomorrow?
There is not yet tomorrow.
That's a good point.